The first serious challenger for Joe Biden's reelection has entered the arena, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announcing that he is going to be running for the Democratic nomination in the 2024 presidential primary against Joe Biden. Obviously, there's what's her name, Marianne Wilkinson, and like a couple other random people, but they're kind of weirdos, and this is the first person who I think is like a serious candidate. I don't think he can beat Biden just because the entire establishment is behind him. And I think the Democratic Party perhaps correctly assumes that he's their best candidate. I do think, though, he is electable on a national stage, and he probably would do better against Trump, arguably, than Biden would do. And we'll get into that. I think he does fill a niche in the political spectrum that I haven't really seen many people try to fill. Trump filled it a little bit, but I think he fills it a lot more fully. He's running very much as like a populist 20th century leftist, very much obviously in line with like JFK or Jimmy Carter, or even like a Bill Clinton, kind of a Democrat from the 20th century who is very populist and is a lot more moderate than some of the more modern figures we have like Barack Obama or Joe Biden. The interesting thing about it is a lot of the positions that he holds now have become shifted over time. So maybe in the 50s and 60s and 70s, these were Democratic Party positions. But now the Republicans, at least the Republican base and the more America First portion of the Republican Party, has embraced them, whereas the Democrats have embraced full-on neoliberalism, interventionism, free trade, and abandoned all of their traditional principles. So, that being said, who is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Obviously, he's the son of Robert Kennedy. Now, that is a good thing to start off with. That means he has instant name recognition. A lot of people are very nostalgic for the 1950s and 60s. They're nostalgic for the age of Kennedy. A lot of people view that as a time when America was united, when it had a purpose against the Soviet Union and the struggle of the Cold War, and as a time period where there was a general sense of optimism in the future that society could be made better and that technology would solve a lot of our problems. And this is something you see both in conservatives and liberals alike, although probably more with conservatives at this point in time. I think that Kennedy's base will very much be moderate Democrats. They call them the Trump Democrats and the Blue Dog Democrats. I don't really think he's conservative. I'm not going to say he's based or anything like that. But I think the niche he fills is something that appeals to a lot of alienated Democratic voters. So he is an environmental lawyer. I remember I used to listen to his show back when he was on Air America. I used to listen to Air America, if anyone remembers that, back in university, which had like the Young Turks, Tom Hartman, Robert Kennedy, Al Franken. Yeah, I know I've changed my politics a lot over time, but I do remember him from that, just not much specific about him. So he has been a environmental lawyer for most of his career. He was also very strongly against the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns, and he believes that Saran, his father's killer, is not guilty and should be released from jail. I'll give him credit, if for nothing else, just not being a generic Democrat and actually having some things that are unique about him, whereas Biden's like the most generic Democrat possible. So let's just go through his website, because it is actually pretty interesting. In particular, the rhetoric. Once again, I wouldn't vote for him over Trump or DeSantis, but I do think it is interesting just looking at the rhetoric, and I think a lot of it is very good. A democratic government is supposed to be of, by, and for the people, but government institutions have betrayed our trust. Now, this is very generic, but that is a line that is very much beloved. Obviously, Abraham Lincoln first said it at the Gettysburg Address, and it very much does summarize kind of the initial American founding, a nation of citizen farmers. Government and tech platforms conspire to surveil and censor the public. Now, this is very interesting coming from a Democrat, because I can't really recall the last time one of them has complained about this. Does anyone remember during the Bush era where they were complaining about the Patriot Act constantly? And you're talking about secret CIA black sites and media censorship and all this kind of stuff. Also, this stuff overwhelmingly benefits the left, so it's interesting that he's calling it out. Regulatory agencies have been captured by those they are supposed to regulate. Wall Street controls the SEC. Polluters and extractive industries dominate the EPA and BLM. I'm assuming that's something other than Black Lives Matter. Pharma controls the CDC, NIH, and FDA. Big agriculture controls the USDA. Big tech has captured the FTC. No wonder trust in government is at all-time lows. It's time to earn it back. So I remember most of these talking points, like from Occupy Wall Street, from kind of the pre-Obama era, when people felt that the Bush government basically just ceded control the entire regulatory apparatus to the Wall Street and the various industries. The government had just experienced complete and total regulatory capture, and a lot of this seemed to be vindicated with the financial crisis. And you had guys like Obama and a lot of the other Democratic candidates come out against Wall Street, but once they took power, they immediately gutted all attempts to reform it and just became puppets of the financial system. I like to point out that the Tea Party was really the only people who were consistently against the bailout. But once again, populist rhetoric, a lack of trust in government, is something you see on both the left and right in America. The fear of a too powerful federal government, the fear of the federal government being controlled by your political adversaries, these are very popular talking points. Obviously, there's Drain the Swamp, there's Yes We Can, change we can believe in. Running as an anti-establishment candidate, Bush did this too, is normally speaking a good thing. From his long experience and familiarity with systems of power, RFK Jr. understands that most people in corporations and government are perfectly decent human beings. Now, I think that's clever because I think that there is both a populist anger here, but there's also a reconciliatory thing. So I think that is a nice caveat to have. They play the game, but a lot of them are fed up with the phoniness, cynical about the paralysis of the system. They feel trapped in it. So you have to let your enemies or people you're going up against have an out where they can save face. By saying this, he's saying we're not going to punish like the average person who works for the company. We're dealing with the fundamentals of the system. Clean government isn't just about removing corrupt individuals. It's about changing a system in which perfectly decent people become agents of corruption without even knowing it. Once again, very conciliatory. We are going to make public, we're going to roll back the secrecy and make government transparent. We'll rein in lobbyists and shut the revolving door. We will get money out of politics. We'll have more integrity in government. So is any of this really substantive? No, I don't think he really lists much here, but I do think rhetorically this will appeal to a lot of Trump supporters. This will appeal to a lot of blue dog Democrats. This will appeal to a lot of working class and even middle class people. Reconciliation. America is more polarized and divided than any time in living memory. Both sides seem to agree that the basic problem is the horrible people on the other side. Both sides are wrong. The basic problem is the division itself. This is very cringy, but it is, I think, going to appeal to a lot of people. A divided public lacks the strength to resist exploitation or to overcome the inertia of the status quo. He's kind of just directing it in a generic direction that's not directly hitting at either side, but he is redirecting it. My aim is to convince every Democrat that you're not a Democrat and every Republican that you're not a Republican. Robert F. Kennedy has clear positions on most of today's divisive trigger issues, but no one is deplorable. Furthermore, most of the disagreements obscure deeper shared values. Everyone wants their children to be safe. Few relish the thought of dead fetuses, nor do they want to force women to have unwanted babies. Everyone wants safe streets. So once again, they're having this this broad attempt to say like I like how this is like revolutionary. Like he's not calling people who disagree with him like literal Satanists who want to eat children. And this is revolutionary politics. Now, I actually have a different opinion on partisanship, but it's I think this will appeal to a lot of people. In the case of race relations, reconciliation includes repairing the damage caused by centuries of bigotry. That sounds like reparations. Our administration will take racial healings seriously through the targeted community repair. Our operating principle is not guilt for the sins of one's ancestors, but compassion. And I think once again that's going to appeal to a lot of white Americans who might feel bad about it, but are tired of like rampant crime of black people demanding reparations, stuff like that. To improve the condition of our black and native brothers and sisters. Um, the easiest thing for a politician to do is to appeal to our greed, anger, or fear or xenophobia, our bigotry, all the alchemies of tribalism. I will appeal to our generosity as a people, our goodness, our kindness, and our courage. Once again, I think one of the big problems in modern politics is people don't offer a positive solution. They don't offer an alternative view of the future. It's just that things are bad and I have to do something to make them slightly less bad. There's no real attempt to inspire. Environment. Robert F. Kennedy transforming the Hudson from a dead river to one of America's cleanest. Real American politics has said that this is like a good thing to do. Is he's not talking about global warming. He's not talking about anything crazy. It's like we're cleaning up rivers. We're cleaning up the environment. We're doing something tangible. Liberal environments with conservative rod and gun folks, they share a desire for clean, healthy environment. Once again, he's not demonizing conservatives. He's not saying these people with guns, the people who like to hunt, who like to fish, are evil. It's maybe we can come together and say we want things clean. Um, Recent years have seen one environmental disaster after another. Floods and droughts, fires and toxic spills, our soils are depleted, the weather is wacky, trees are dying, and the water in many places is toxic. Chronic diseases are at an all time high. We're going to address these problems at their root causes. First, we will shift agricultural subsidies so to as encourage regenerative practices. So, like, I don't know if that's good or not, but that sounds good. That's not we're going to punish farmers. That's not we're going to completely shut down the agricultural sector. We're going to help out farmers to do better. Okay, today a new generation of farmers and ranchers is building soil, replenishing groundwater, and detoxifying land, all with producing as much as conventional farmers and earning a decent livelihood. See, I think this is a very underutilized area of politics. I do think it's a friend of mine once said green conservatism is a unicorn, but it's a unicorn I like. I do think, especially in states like Montana, you do have a lot of conservatives with an environmentalist bent. They just don't like the green movement for very obvious reasons, and I don't like the deindustrialization. But they'd be willing to listen to suggestions that aren't going to destroy the economy and will make things better. So I think a lot of conservatives, when they read something like this, are like, okay, we're going to keep producing food. Food prices aren't going to go through the roof. The economy is not going to be a disaster, but maybe we can make things better. Once again, we're appealing to hope. We're appealing to actual solutions rather than just punishing people and demonizing people. Finally, we will incentivize the transition of industry to zero waste cycles and clean energy sources, and forgo agreements with other countries to implement these policies. Forge agreements, sorry, not forgo, through the global supply chain. That's another talking point that I think is relevant because that is something a lot of conservatives correctly complain about. That we can't kneecap our own economy if China and various third world countries are not, and it's going to make the trade imbalance worse. So he's saying, I get that. We're going to deal with that. Um, Toxic waste, industrial poisons, and pesticides. Note, I do not see, is the word carbon even mentioned here? No, we do not see carbon mentioned here. We do not see global warming mentioned here. We don't see Climate change mentioned here, we see stuff that like the average person can imagine: toxic waste, reforestation, clean rivers, hunting, fishing. You see droughts and wildfires and soil erosion all the time. These are very normal stuff. We'll protect wildlands from further development. Once again, I think protecting land was initially like a conservative idea. Like you had, I get that uh, Teddy identified as a progressive, but he was kind of a hybrid. But the idea of if you're going to talk about like blood and soil conservatism, if you're going to talk about the organic nation, part of that is the organics of the nation. It's preserving your what makes your nation distinct, be it the natural environment, be it the unique species that live there, and preserving that for future generations. I mean, I don't know what's more conservative or traditional than that. By curbing mining, logging, oil drinking, and suburban sprawl, oil drilling, not oil drinking, we will become a global advocate for rainforest preservation and marine restoration. Once again, that sounds nice. We're not talking about global warming, we're not talking about something abstract. Most people want to save the rainforest, most people like the idea of restoring the other stuff. We're going to try to, he's speaking to people's like needs. Revitalization. The time has come to reverse America's economic decline decades in the making. Our country faces a widening wealth gap, the most unequal since the 1920s, rampant debt, decaying infrastructure, and a hollowed out industrial base. These are all things that used to be very common to say. I remember even like pre Obama, people on the left would talk about this stuff all the time. Does anyone remember like back when Michael Moore was decent? When he was doing like downsize this and Roger and Me and talking about the hollowing out of America's infrastructure and calling for protectionism? The average number of the average American looks at this and says, "Yeah, I agree." Um, the average person doesn't like the wealth gap, and this is be they conservative or liberal. They do think that there is one. They do think affordability and hyperinflation is a problem. The difference is that people on the conservative side don't want to just punish the rich. They want to raise up the lower classes instead of redistribute wealth. Every night, tens of millions of American children go to bed hungry. Um, Always something. Everyone wants to feed the kids. Especially when you have such a problem with overproduction of food, it doesn't really make sense. Millions of Americans must choose between food and medicine. Millions more living on the edge, just a single car repair away from disaster. Once again, I think this is true for a lot of people, conservative and liberal alike. They do have to make these choices. The healthcare system is a disaster. A lot of people can't afford or are financially irresponsible and won't save money. And if they crash their car, they're screwed. And they're going to have to begin the debt cycle. Then we bring up the black, native, and minority populations. Government assistance to the nation's most vulnerable is a high priority, but even more important is to reverse the policies that have led to such poverty in the first place. And we are not talking about reparations here. We're not talking about eating the rich. We're saying, look, we're going to rebuild infrastructure. We're going to get good paying jobs for people. We're going to do that. And once again, that is a positive view of the future. That is something that both conservatives and liberals care about. Let's see, we will enact policies. We will rebuild the industrial infrastructure ruined by 40 years of offshoring and misguided free trade schemes. No one likes offshoring. No one likes, like, Trump. I think a lot of his support came from the fact that he questioned the whole free trade thing. We will enact policies that favor small and medium businesses, which are the nation's real job creators on the dynamos of American enterprise. I never know if that's really true, but it's something people like. I think it's a real American politics said, and I'm partially, I'll admit, doing this, but I think I have a different perspective. Republicans, one of their main sources of support is that they do generally support business, and so a lot of middle class business owners will just vote for them. We will support labor reclaiming its fair share of American prosperity. We will break up too big to fail banks and monopolies. and when crisis strikes, bail out the homeowners, debtors, and small business owners instead. I think that's very good rhetoric. I don't know if it's really possible, but let's think about this logically for the minute. Let's take the average American, someone who earns between $0 and like $100,000. Who is it that they probably hate? Who is it who they think screwing them? The banks, the pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare companies, the industrial companies that offshore. Most people fucking hate these people, and they're good targets. And you just don't see that many people actually target them now that the Democrats are mostly corporate shills. Um, Global developments, particularly the end of the US dollar status as the world's unchallenged currency reserve, portend turbulent economic conditions ahead. Yet at the same time, we know that America is a fundamentally wealthy nation, blessed with vast lands, rich resources, and a creative population. This is the vitality we'll tap into to turn this country around. Once again, we're harkening back to Kennedy and optimism. Things are bad, but we can get out of this. I think Biden said our worst days are ahead of us. I think also like that's why people like Make America Great Again. Is it's not just black pill, it's not just things are gone. It's we can still save it. We can turn this thing around. Another key aspect of American revitalization is our healthcare system, which consumes nearly one fifth of our GDP. It just doesn't. It isn't just a matter of shifting the burden of who pays. The problem is much deeper. Healthcare spending per capita has increased 12-fold since 1960. Are we 12 times healthier? Now, I don't know what that is adjusted for inflation. It probably is like 6 or 7 times. I don't know what the inflation rate has been exactly, but it's definitely like far outpaced inflation. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. We face terrible pandemic, not of COVID, but of chronic diseases, autoimmune allergies, diabetes, obesity, addiction, anxiety, depression affect 2/3 of the population, up from a couple percentages. Um, we will go about beyond making existing modalities available all for. Sorry, I'm just stuttering here. To include low-cost alternative and holistic therapies that have been marginalized in a pharma-dominated system. We'll move from a sick care system to a wellness society. Once again, very optimistic, appealing to basically everybody. Now, here's one that I think is kind of a very pleasant surprise. In the long term, a nation's strength does not come from its armies. America spends as much on weaponry as the next 9 nations combined. Once again, this is a very popular talking point about Democrats during the Bush era. I think even some Republicans have started to get very tired of the military industrial complex and its nonsense. Yet the country has grown weaker, not stronger, over the last 30 years. Even as its military technology has reigned supreme, America has been hollowing out from the inside. We cannot be a stronger, secure nation when our infrastructure, industry, society, and economy are infirm. I don't think there's really any guilt here. Like, he's not saying America's evil. He's not saying that America is bad. He's saying, look, for the good of the country, we have to end this stuff and start spending on us again. Make America strong again. When a body is sick, it withdraws its energy from the extremities in order to nourish the vital regions. Very kind of like almost integralist talking point there. It is time to end the imperial project and attend to all that has been neglected. The crumbling cities, the antiquated railways, the falling water systems, the decaying infrastructure. Annual defense spending is close to $1 trillion. We maintain 800. I didn't know it was that high. Wow. The peace dividend that was supposed to come after the Berlin Wall fell was never redeemed. Now we have another chance. We'll start the process of unwinding empire. We will bring the troops home. We will stop. This does sound a lot like a JFK speech. We'll stop racking up unpayable debt, fighting one war after another. The military will return to its proper role of defending our country. We will end the proxy wars, bombing campaigns, all this other stuff. That's become so normal, most people don't know what's happening. But it's happening. A constant strain as our strength. It's time to come home and restore this country. Isolationism always has a lot of appeal in America. Um, Ukraine. Uh, he's saying we're going to try to um, come to a diplomatic agreement over the Ukraine thing, which I think a lot of people like. Let's see here, anti-imperialist. Um, just scrolling through that. So I think a lot of people like that. Um, Nothing restore our military, our moral leadership, and try to make people like us again. Civil liberties. Let's take a look at this because this is another interesting one that I think he differs a lot from most Democrats. Our administration will make it top priority to protect and restore the fundamental liberties enshrined in the Bill of Rights. I haven't heard that one in a long time. That hold the essence of what America can be. These civil liberties have endured constant assault for over 20 years, starting with the Bush-Cheney War on Terror and accelerating in the era of COVID lockdowns. I feel like the Patriot Act is something everyone keeps dropping the ball on. I think most people want that in the NSA to be demolished at this point in time, and they want the government spying to stop. Freedom of speech will dismantle the censorship industrial complex in which big tech censors, deplatforms, shadow bans, and algorithmically suppresses any person or opinion the government asks them. We will respect the right to privacy and freedom from unreasonable search and seizures. See, this is once again something you saw a lot in the pre-Obama era, which Obama promptly abandoned. But like this appeals to a lot of if not conservatives, like I said, moderate Democrats, moderate Republicans. Uh, I do think that this platform, because who else are people to the left of Trump going to vote for? Like, let's be honest. Are they going to vote for like a third party? Are they going to vote for Gary Johnson if he runs again? No, they're probably going to vote Democrat. But a lot of the like Democrats who might have voted for Trump because they hated Hillary or they hated Biden, I think would swap back over. You might even see some of the Midwest go back in a Democratic direction. The free flow of information is the sunlight and water and fertilizer for democracy. We will never weaponize the law against our political opponents. I do see a lot of stuff here that is recent talking points from conservative stuff. He talks a lot about he was very much against the COVID lockdown. Black owned businesses got destroyed during it. Instead of defunding the police, we will transform the police. Um, they will focus their attention on serious crimes, not harassing ordinary people. Once again, it's a non answer, but I think it does at least somewhat appeal to both sides. And I think a lot of this campaign is literally just not shitting on people who marginally disagree with you. And we have other stuff like this. Middle class was systematically wiped out under COVID lockdowns. I don't think RFK Jr. is a conservative. I don't think he's a like based or anything. But I do think he has very good rhetoric, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from him. Um, I think he is reaching out to. It's kind of like he's reaching out to the Bernie crowd, but the non-crazy Bernie crowd, like the Bernie crowd who thought that like people who might be sympathetic to the anti-establishment, anti-corporate rhetoric, but thought Bernie was just too radical or Bernie was crazy or something like that. So I do think it's going to be interesting. I don't think he can beat Biden. I don't know if he'll even really come close. But I do think it's a very interesting turn in American politics. And I think it's something that Trump should take a close look at and maybe steal some of the rhetoric, steal some of the talking points, where necessary, take some of the policies. I think a lot of the environmental stuff that he lists there, and I know his actual positions are way more radical, is stuff that a lot of conservatives could just copy paste. Also, for the love of all that is holy, Republicans, come up with a healthcare plan. Any healthcare plan. Like I don't even it can be like an ANCAP one. Just have something. The fact that you guys don't have a healthcare plan and continue to refuse to come up with one is one of the major reasons why you lose and you can't expand into new states. There's a not insignificant number of people who share your social values and might vote for you but they think the Democrats are more likely to give them some sort of health care. And if you have to choose between cultural values and like being able to afford medication, a lot of people will understandably choose the latter, and I can't really blame them for that. So that's the video. I think it's an interesting development in American politics. We'll see what happens, but I think RFK Jr. Is going to be a bit of a disruptor. I don't think he can beat Biden, but I think in a general election he would beat Trump pretty handily. Anyways, God bless everyone. More exciting content to come, and I'll talk to you again real soon.